Hello, thanks for joining me. I'm in the workshop again today and I've got my Harley-Davidson Dyna Fat Bob up on the workbench because the rear brake has packed in. Here's the rear brake pedal. Nothing happening at all, absolutely nothing there. I haven't looked at it yet, but I strongly suspect that I've got a seal gone in the rear brake master cylinder. So I thought, yeah, having a look at that, trying to fix it would make for an interesting video. So whenever I'm doing something I think would be of interest and use to somebody else, I'm filming it. So that's what I'm going to do today. Please excuse me if you can hear a bit of a noise in the background. I've got a dehumidifier running in the workshop today. It is horrendous weather. We've got low mist and sort of just dampness hanging in the air. Up on the wall of the workshop behind me, I've got a temperature gauge and a humidity meter, and it's showing 94% humidity. So as soon as I take the cover off the bike, everything is just getting covered in a layer of humidity, and it feels really sticky in here. So yeah, got the dehumidifier running. Hopefully it's going to dry it up a little bit, so hope it's not too distracting having that noise in the background. Okay, let's have a look at this bike and see what the problem is. I've moved the camera in and I've got a work light shining on it. So this is the rear brake master cylinder. So at this end here, this is the rod coming from the pedal. There's the reservoir up there, you can see, and this is the switch, the electrical switch for the brake light at the back. And there's this rubber boot on here, and you can probably see there's a lot of dirt and stuff on there that looks like it's kind of stuck on there because of fluid. So I'm thinking I've got a leak underneath here. Don't know if I can just ease that off. Yeah, I'm gonna have to move the camera to be able to get in to move that. But just looking at all of that debris and dirt on there that's sticking on there, it's obviously sticking on there because there's something wet and sticky on there, which I think I can't feel any fluid on the bottom of there anywhere. I mean, I may be wrong, but just got to investigate it. I mean, the other thing is to have a look at the rear brake caliper, so we'll have a quick look at that. Okay, I'm just holding the camera in my hand, so excuse me if it's a bit unsteady, but here's the rear caliper, and I can't see any evidence of any kind of leak. Again, I'm just feeling for leak fluid. There's no kind of leak around the banjo joint there. If it was leaking past the pistons, there would be fluid down on the disc and all around the rear axle here, and there's nothing there. So I can't see anything. So I suspect the problem lies with the master cylinder. I'm going to start with that. I think the obvious thing to do is to start by taking the cap off the master cylinder reservoir, and if it's empty, then that shows that the system is drained. So hopefully you can see there, I've just taken the lid off the rear brake master cylinder, and the reservoir is indeed empty, which shows that the fluid has drained out. So that's why I've got no pressure in the rear brake system. But where is it leaking out is the question. So I'm going to start pulling the master cylinder apart and see if we can track it down. My apologies, it's very difficult to film this because the brake master cylinder is tucked away here right under the exhaust, so it's difficult to get a camera in to film it, but once I'm working on it you can't see anything anyway. But this is the rod that goes to the brake pedal, so I'm just undoing this. So I've undone this lock nut here and then undoing the rod from this one from the master cylinder, so I've already started on that. So I'll disconnect that totally, and then at the back end here I'll just pull the wires off the switch, remove the switch which goes into the banjo joint with the hydraulic cable at the back. That means then I'll be able to take this, I don't know if you can see it there because I'm not focusing it, there's a big nut here, undo that, and I'll be able to then take the cylinder assembly off. So I'm going to do all of that now, and then I'll get back to you once I've actually got it off the bike. I've got the master cylinder off the bike. That was relatively straightforward. That's the nut that holds it on. Just for your reference, that's a 1 1/8 inch nut. And also interesting to note, where it goes into the frame bracket, there's like a square section on this, and that's to align it properly so that it sits obviously with the reservoir perfectly upright when you tighten it down. So obviously I'll need to clean the Loctite off that, clean up that thread before I put it back together. But I'm going to take this rubber boot off and disassemble the piston and everything, and probably I'm going to need a service kit. Pretty grubby, I'll need to clean it all up, but let's take it all apart. I've got my work gloves on so I don't get brake fluid all over my hands. Just trying to clean some of the dirt off. It's very dirty, but you can see, hopefully you can see there's a circlip on here and then this metal washer. So take that off, I should be able to slide this rubber boot off here. So I'll get this clip off first. So get the pliers in there, there's so much dirt in the hole. There we are. So that's this circlip off, and the rubber boot, there's a large spring inside it, and that brings us to the piston assembly. Another circlip holding that in. Interesting, I can't really see a lot of fluid around here, but it's all coming apart anyway, so I need to get my internal circlip pliers to undo that. Just go and grab those. That's the internal circlip out. So everything's all bone dry. Interesting. Well, to be honest, I don't see any evidence of leakage there, but we're going to have it all apart as we got so far anyway, so I might as well take the whole thing apart now. Right, we'll take this piston assembly out. I see what the problem is. Oh, I've got a crack there. There's a huge crack in there. Gosh, I wonder how that's happened. But I strongly suspect that that is the problem. Looks like I'm going to need a new rear master cylinder. That's not going to be cheap, is it? But anyway, I'll carry on stripping it down, have a look at the overall situation. Right, I'll see if I can get some more light on that, just to show you. I'll get my little work light here. So, yeah, having cleaned all the cack off it, let's stand that work light up there. I don't know if you can see, there's a crack there, but that crack is not new. It's absolutely, it was full of, I didn't notice it until I cleaned all the cack off the back of the unit, because it was absolutely full of old sort of dried up stuff and what have you. But here's the thing, nobody has ever worked on this bike other than me, and I've never had this off the bike before, which makes me think it's been like that since new, since it came out of the showroom. Now, looking at it, that doesn't explain the leak actually, because it's just in the outer housing, which is just holding the cylinder. But of course, I'm not, having found that, I'm not happy with it. But I'm going to continue taking it apart, because yeah, I'm still not sure how and where it's been leaking. I'm not, despite finding that huge crack, I'm not convinced even now that it's the there was absolutely no sign of I thought it would be leaking past the seals here on the piston. If I just show you that, you know, there's the piston there, but you can probably see for yourself that the outer surface of that is bone dry. You know, there's absolutely no sign of any fluid having, you know, worked its way past the two seals. I was just thinking it was going to be a case of replacing these two seals, but there's nothing got past those at all. Yeah, but obviously not happy with that, but we'll see. Let's carry on stripping it down and see where I get to. So here we are. I removed the big circlip off this end, and then it just pushes through, so sort of where are we, that way around, like it was that way around, like that. it just pushes through, and then you can see quite clearly this is where the leak has been. Just look at all the build up here of old brake fluid that's kind of crystallized and what have you, and that's clearly because of this crack here in this housing. I mean, that's quite a prominent crack, and it runs nearly all the way along, so there's no way around it. I need a new one, don't I? Which is a bit of a bummer, because that's an expense I could do without just at the moment, but such is life. You know, I can't be riding around with dodgy rear brake, can I? So I'm going to have a look online, order myself a new master cylinder, and I shall continue making this video once I've got the new bits. So I think just at the moment, take my gloves off, clean up, and go and put the kettle on, have a cup of tea, get on the computer. Due to the magic of video editing, I now have a replacement rear brake master cylinder. I initially, when I took it all apart and found the crack, so there's the crack here in the housing, I thought I'll replace it with an aftermarket one. So I had a look at all the usual suppliers that I get parts for my Harley-Davidson, and there just doesn't seem to be anything around in terms of aftermarket replacement brake cylinders for these bikes. I think it's probably just because it falls into a bit of a gap in terms of its age. You know, it's not a sort of a classic, a vintage bike. And also, I think probably a lot to do with, well, two factors. One is that, you know, the master cylinder is hidden away, as you saw when I took it away. It's hidden away underneath the bike, under the frame, behind the exhaust. You don't see it, so there's no need for any sort of fancy chrome versions of them. And secondly, doesn't really need a performance upgrade. It works absolutely fine. So I think maybe, I mean, I'm wrong. I mean, you maybe tell me in the comments, oh, there's loads of aftermarket versions available. But in the end, I contacted my local Harley-Davidson dealer, which is Iron City Motorcycles in Gateshead. They were very helpful. So initially they said, oh yeah, you can get a replacement for just the housing here, which is the master cylinder and the outer portion here, the bit that's cracked. So you can just replace that. And that was actually relatively cheap. But then I looked at the rest of it and I thought, well, you know, with all of the corrosion on here, on, you know, all of these parts, and even on the piston, and I want to replace all of the seals, the rubbers on it and everything, I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go for a complete replacement master cylinder unit. So that did cost me a little bit more, but I was surprised. Not as much as I thought it would cost, being Harley-Davidson. So here it is. Here's the brand new item, and I think it's just going to make life easier. I know that it's all going to be okay. I don't need to start fettling around with any of the parts. I just need to plumb this into the system, top it up and bleed it, and I should be good to go. So yeah, just for kind of the easier option. I'll keep all of these bits in a box somewhere for spares, but you know, they probably just kind of sit decaying somewhere. Right, so let's get on with putting it back together then. Right, once again, it's quite hard to actually see what's going on under here, but I film it the best I can. So, whilst I had the master cylinder off, I was waiting for the new part to arrive. I just checked the condition of the brake lines, make sure it's okay, and cleaned up around here a bit. This is just a soft nylon brush. Just, you know, cleaned some of the dirt off around there, and wiped it round with a bit of brake cleaner. You'll see there's a square hole here, and on the master cylinder there's a square bit, and that just makes sure that when you fit it in place it aligns properly and it doesn't twist out of alignment when you tighten it up. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put some Loctite on the thread here, and then there's this big nut here that holds it on. So I'll just put a bit of, this is thread lock 243 on this thread to make sure it doesn't come off.
Right, this is a, you never know on a Harley-Davidson whether fittings are metric or imperial, but this is actually a 28 inch, 28 mil, sorry, so it's metric. It's this nut. Put this in place. The workshop manual says to torque this nut down to between 30 and 40 foot-pound. So I'll split the difference, set my torque wrench at 35, and we'll get it in there. It's a bit tight for swinging the torque wrench around in here. And get that torqued up to the right setting. Just need to offer a bit of support here. Okay, I'm going to connect this rod then at the front end. This is the rod that goes to the pedal. I've cleaned the thread on this and I've put some grease on it because I don't want that to seize into the piston when I put it together. So just lift up the pedal. I can guide this in, get it aligned, and then screw that on. And there's a lock nut on there, but I'm not going to put the lock nut on just yet until I've adjusted the height of the pedal at the front end, which I'll show you later. I'll move the camera just to get the height of the pedal right. Right, I've just threaded that on a reasonable amount of way. I'll fine tune that later when I adjust the pedal height. That, by the way, is a 12mm on that. Okay, so that's it. So now I need to move on to this end. I've got the brake switch here, banjo bolt, brake switch banjo bolt, which I've cleaned up. Just cleaned up the body of it there, and the contacts. You need to put some fresh sealing washers on that. It's got some Doherty washers. You should always replace them with new washers. So put these couple of Doherty washers on there, and then thread that into the rear end of the cylinder assembly. That is a 17mm. The manual suggests that this banjo bolt, the switch in it, needs to be torqued down to between 21 and 25 foot-pound. So again, I split the difference, set my torque wrench to 23 foot-pound, and we'll just tighten that down there. And again, it's a little bit difficult getting in there just because of the exhaust. But not a lot of movement, but I'll get there. Okay. Before I connect these electrical connectors back onto the switch here, just going to put some electrical grease on there because of where this is located by the back wheel underneath the frame. Gets a lot of dirt thrown upon it, and you know, there's potential corrosion there. So you can see that even though my back's so old, there's no corrosion at all on there, and that's because I have carefully protected that with this grease. So this is silicone electrical grease, the clear stuff. Right, that's those on. Of course it does no harm to have a bit of grease around there just to stop corrosion on the banjo bolt itself. Right, so that's the system all back together. Now need to top up the fluid and bleed the system. For bleeding brakes, I typically normally use this, which is a Mighty Vac vacuum system. So you've got a vacuum pump in there. You connect that up to the rear caliper, top up the master cylinder, and then you use the vacuum pump to suck the fluid through. Sometimes I use a sort of conventional system with a pipe and a bowl at the end, but this is an easy way of doing it. You just never know with Harley-Davidson, so even though the fittings on the master cylinder for the brake were metric, on the rear end it's imperial, so the bleed nipple here is a was it 3/8 fitting for that. So yeah, you need to have both imperial and metric tools to hand when you're working on a Harley. And the brake fluid that I tend to use in all my bikes, unless the manufacturer specifies otherwise, is this Castrol React .4, and I always have several bottles of this in. The problem that you've always got when bleeding the rear brake system on Harleys like this is the accessibility of the master cylinder reservoir. As you can see, it's tucked right down there, so it's not easy to pour more brake fluid in there. I will typically either use a clean funnel, small clean funnel to get fluid in, or a syringe. I've got a large syringe, and that's quite useful for, you can just sort of measure how much you're putting in, particularly as you're wanting to just top it up the right level. Using this syringe with a pipe on it is the way I found easiest to topping up the master cylinder without spilling any. So I suck some brake fluid up into the syringe, and then I can insert that pipe down into the reservoir and pump that in. And you've got quite a lot of control over how much you put in using this approach. I find that works well for me. Right, so now I'll get this Mighty Vac going, but what I find is it's actually easy to have two people doing this job, but I'm doing it on my own. So I'm pumping the vacuum pump with the one hand, but you've got to then keep an eye on the fluid level in the master cylinder, because it does go down quite quickly as you using this pump system. So I just keep topping it up as I suck the fluid through. I don't know if you're going to be able to see through there, but there's actually quite a lot of fluid coming through the system there. And then I release the vacuum on that. Just make sure my master cylinder is topped up. Right, I'm going to lock off that bleed nipple and just see how that is doing. And just move you over to where you can see the movement on the brake pedal. So that feels firm, it's not spongy at all, so I'm happy with that. I'm also happy with the position of the brake pedal there. Looks about right. I can always fine tune it later if I want, but what I'm going to do then is, before I take the bike down off the bench, I'm just going to lock off that lock nut. So I just pop the lid back onto the brake master cylinder and we're done. Okay, so that's me done. Thanks a lot for watching. Hope you've enjoyed that, found it interesting. I just thought it was worth recording from a couple of points of view. Firstly, that process of diagnosing and finding the problem, relatively straightforward, relatively simple.
and secondly, you know, in terms of seeing the internal workings of the rear brake master cylinder, and then of course, you know, the process of bleeding the system and put it back together again. Okay, so I'm going to get the bike down off the bench and take it out for a quick spin. So see you again soon, I hope. Bye.